Hi foxes, I hope you're all okay. It's another beautiful day outside, so I hope you get out to enjoy some sunshine. Make sure you wear some sun cream and a hat though. We're going to start chapter 10 of Pax today, and we're going to find out how Peter is getting on travelling on his bad foot. At the jog in the wall where he'd seen the deer, Peter stopped. There was blood already. He'd stumbled and ripped open the tender web of skin at the base of his thumb on a jagged splinter, and buckets of sweat. His arms trembled from the strain of lifting his weight for only these few minutes, his palms already raw with the rubber grips, and the throbbing in his right foot menaced like thunder. But none of this was what was wrong. It wasn't even the prospect of returning to his grandfather's grim house. He was going in the wrong direction. He wheeled round, he stabbed the ground and swung over it, stabbed and swung, until he planted himself in the doorway of Vola's barn again. He drew himself up tall. No! Vola's head snapped. She shot him a warning scowl, but on her face Peter read a flash of something else. Fear. I'm not going back, he said more firmly. Whether you help me or not, I am going to get my fox. Help you? Peter moved to the bench and hoisted himself up. Teach me what you said about moving from my arms, about getting strong. You learned how to get around on one leg. Teach me. You were a medic. You set my bone. Please, I'll do whatever you tell me to. He picked up the cider and drank it down to show his trust. Then I'll leave. But even if you won't help me, I'm going to get him. Vola put her hands on her hips and lowered her eye to him. A tamed fox set loose in the wild. You know he might be dead, don't you? I know, and it would be my fault. If he's dead, I need to bring him home and bury him. Either way, I'm going to go back and find my fox and bring him home. Vola studied Peter as if she were seeing him for the first time. So which is it? You going back for your home or for your pet? They're the same thing, Peter said, the answer sudden and sure, although a surprise to him. And you're going to do this no matter who tries to stop you, because it's the right thing for you, at your core. Vola made a fist and thumped her chest. Your core, is that true? Peter waited before answering, because this woman, maybe crazy, maybe not, had asked as if the fate of the world depended on it. But the answer was the same as it would have been if he'd blurted it out. The answer would have been the same if he'd waited a lifetime to think it over. He thumped his own chest and felt a muscle of his heart leap. Yes. In fact, there is nothing else I know at my core. The woman nodded. Well, you're 12. That's old enough to know for yourself, I expect. I'm not about to go messing with that, so all right. You'll help me? I'll help you. Vola extended her hand to shake. On 3 conditions. Well, that was a quick chapter. I wonder what her conditions are going to be. Now, chapter 11's back over to the foxes. My brother was born in my mother's second litter. They came early in the season. Last year, spring came late. Snow fell and did not melt. The earth stayed frozen beneath it. I lived nearby. I helped hunt. All day long, our parents and I searched for food because the kits were always hungry, but there was never enough. 2 of his litter mates died on the same day. The farm, our mother urged. At the humans' farm, there were always fat mice in the warm barn. At the humans' farm, there were eggs in the chicken coop. Our father would not risk it. When her third kit grew too weak to stand, our mother defied him. Runt raised his head and gave Bristle a pleading look. Bristle ignored it. She led the strongest of her new kits to my sister, and me to the humans' farm. Runt edged closer and pressed his nose into Pax's shoulder. Instantly, the vixen lashed at his cheek. Although Pax noted she did not use her claws, Runt dropped to the ground. The ground around the barn was cleared of snow by many footprints, animals as well as human. The air was rich with the smell of rodents. Our mother headed for a gap in the wooden boards near the base. With a few tail lengths behind, just before she reached it, steel jaws sprang out of the earth with such spread that the air snapped. Our mother screamed. The clamp held her front leg. The more she thrashed, the deeper the metal cut. She began biting at her leg to free it. Every time we tried to come near, she ordered us away. Our father appeared. He had followed our tracks. He chased my sister and me back into the bush and ordered us to stay there. Then he set out to help our mother. The scene she conveyed was of 2 foxes bonded by both an old love and a new fear, the fear so terrible that their eyes rolled back in their sockets, so vivid that Pax could smell its sharp scent. Runt began to whimper, a piteous sound that made Pax want to comfort him, but Bristle warned him to keep away. A human came then, with a stick. Both our parents screamed at us to run home. We stayed. We saw the human raise the stick. And in front of our eyes, our mother and our father burst into blood and fur and shattered bones splattered over the snow. Runt whined and backed away toward the den again, and again Bristle stopped him. My sister and I could not leave our parents' bodies. Darkness fell, and the next day came, and still we hid in a pile of wood beside the barn. Finally we set out, but that night it began to snow. The snow blotted all around blotted out all sound and scent. Lost, we crawled under a sweep of pine boughs, and I curled myself around my sister, who was so much smaller. In the morning she died. When the snow stopped, I saw that we had sheltered beneath a great pine at the top of our ridge. We had been within sight of home. The image she had shared then, her sister's frozen corpse at the base of a mighty pine, seemed to exhaust her. Why do we have no family, brother? Runt turned to Pax. Because of the humans, we have no family. Bristle turned her golden eyes on Pax, inviting a challenge. If he could have, he would have made her know every kindness of every day with this boy. But the hatred she had for humans was deep and fair. Instead, he offered his cheek in sympathy. Bristle turned away and ordered her brother into the den. Chapter 12. Back to Peter. Let's find out what Vola's 3 rules were. You coming in, or am I just holding the door open for the flies? Peter dropped his rucksack. He rebalanced himself on the crutches and stared at the log cabin. These trees grew here? It hadn't been a question, but Vola nodded and pointed uphill. Spruce from the top of Mason's Ridge. Lincoln logs is that what you're thinking? Sort of, but it wasn't. Peter reached out to touch one of the logs. What would it feel like to make something so consequential? To cut timbers and watch them fall out of the clear blue sky and roll them down to a clearing, your hands sticky with sharp scented pitch, and then to lift them into place, notched and stacked one over the other. Yes, just like the toys that had been his favourite in kindergarten, the old set in the tall cupboard canister, and to end up with a home. You built this? No, before my time. Now come in, I don't have all day. Peter still didn't move. What are the conditions? You said you'd tell me when we got here. Vola sighed and stepped back down to the slab of granite that formed the front step, letting the screen door clap shut. She picked up a jar of seed, and a cloud of birds fluttered down from the trees to surround her. She filled a feeder that hung from the corner rafter before turning to answer him. Number 1. I don't want anyone coming round here. I live by myself for a reason. You write to your grandfather and tell him whatever it takes to make sure nobody comes around here. Besides, it's only fair you let your family know you're not dead in a ditch somewhere. Peter reared back so fast that he almost toppled over. The pain that moment caused was searing, but he bit his lip. No, he'd come and get me. No. Condition number 1, non-negotiable. She scooped a few seeds from a jar and held out her palm. A chickadee left the feeder and settled on her fingertips. He pecked at the seeds, and when they were gone, she tossed him back into the air. She turned back to Peter. Number 2, you're going to tell me why you're carrying that bracelet. Peter glanced down at his pack and felt his heart clench to protect what was so private. Why? Because I'm curious about you, and you can tell a lot about a soldier by what he carries into battle. But I'm not a soldier, I'm just going home. Is that so? Because it sounds to me like you're headed off to fight for something in place of where there's a war. But have it your way, you're not a soldier. Condition 2 is still this. When I ask you, you're going to tell me why you've brought this bracelet with you. Why that particular thing, the truth, that's the rule here. Agreed? Peter nodded. His right foot throbbed and his left ached from the extra burden, and his shirt was sweat-soaked from the exertion of hobbling 100 yards from the barn. But he stood his ground. And number 3? You're going to help me with something. I see that look. Don't worry. It's just a project needs a second person, that's all. But I'm not ready to tell you what it is yet. She picked up his rucksack. Inside. It's time to get you off that foot, and I suspect you're hungry, mister, not exactly running away from home, no bat Peter. Suddenly Peter was starving. Still he hesitated. He pivoted to look at the walls, which the sun was lightening to smoky blue. Pax was out there. He was still so far away. Vola came up behind him. Peter sensed her raising her hand toward his shoulder and then letting it fall back. I know what you're thinking, she said. but you are not fit to go yet." Inside the cabin was bright and smelled faintly of smoke. Vola tapped a pine table and Peter sat. She draped a blanket over his shoulders and then left and came back with a plastic bag full of ice cubes. She propped his foot on the chair and wedged the ice bag against it. With a washcloth, she cleaned the blood from his hand. Finally, she pressed him a cutting board with a loaf of bread and knife on it. Peter put it down. "How long will it take?" "Depends on you," the woman pointed to the bread. "What, you can't use your you can't use your hands either? Slice that up." "How long?" You can go when you can hike over the terrain on those crutches for 8 hours a day. 2 weeks, I'd guess. 6 slices." "You don't understand. He won't survive." Vola lowered her head to glare at Peter. She yanked her thumb to the wall behind him. "Number 11. Peter twisted round. A jumble of index cards was pinned on the wall. "The Gulf Stream will flow through a straw, provided the straw is aligned to the Gulf Stream and not at cross currents." He read aloud from the one with the 11 scrawled over it. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means, align yourself, boy." "Align myself?" "Figure out how things are and accept it. You've got a broken foot. Broken. The deal is you stay until I say you're ready. I told you my conscience is stretched to the limit, so that's your choice. Stay here until I say, or go back to your grandfather's now. You change your mind about that?" "No, but..." "Then accept it, hey? Now, slice the bread." Peter started to argue, but then closed his mouth. He wasn't staying for any 2 weeks, but obedient and helpful was the safest to play now. He ducked his head and set to work cutting 6 thick, even slices of bread while Vola slapped a chunk of butter into an iron skillet and snapped on a flame beneath it. Without turning around, she motioned to a shelf above the counter. "Pick yourself something." Canning jars stacked 3 deep, gleaming like a rainbow of liquid jewels along the length of the shelf. Peter read the plain block capital letters: cherries, plums, tomatoes, blueberries, apples, pumpkin, pears, green beans, beets, peaches. Braids of diced garlic and chili peppers hung beside the shelf. "You grow all this?" Vola nodded, her back still to him. "The tree that runs along the stone wall are in bloom. What are they?" "Nearest to the wall? Peaches." He pointed at the jar at the end. "Peaches," he said. "Please, ma'am." Vola opened the jar and handed him a fork. There's a twig in it or something." Vola reached into the jar, popped the stick into her mouth, sucked the syrup off, pitched the stick over her shoulder into the sink and rolled her eyes. "Lord, cinnamon, eat." She gathered the bread he'd cut with a curt nod of approval. "Cheddar or Swiss?" "Cheddar, I guess." Vola straightened. "You guess, boy. You don't know." Peter shrugged and speared a peach chunk. It tasted as bright and golden as it looked. Vola seemed to be working up a whole lot more to say about the cheese issue, but then she pressed her lips together, spun around on the point of her wooden leg, and clumped out the back door. She came back in with a slab of cheese a moment later, then set to work wordlessly making sandwiches. Peter heard them sizzle as she pressed them into the hot skillet. He surveyed the cabin. It wasn't big, but it didn't feel cramped either. Sunlight flooded in through the clean windows, washing the log walls in the honey glow. 2 blue-striped armchairs flanked a stone fireplace, and a trunk stacked with books served at the table between them. Small barrels held lanterns, and more hung from the beams. There were photos on the mantel, a few paintings on walls, and a basket of yarn beside the armchair. Through an open door by the fireplace, Peter saw the corner of a bed neatly made with a yellow-checked quilt. It was a surprisingly normal home for a crazy person, yet something was missing. Peter noticed then how quiet it was. Silent, actually, except for the bird calls outside and the butter sputtering in the skillet. But that wasn't it. Not exactly. "Hey," he said as it dawned on him. "You don't have electricity." The woman flipped the sandwiches. "As far as I know, that's not a crime in this country. Not yet, anyway." Peter tried to think about what he would miss without electricity, but there were too many things to count. He chased out the last bit of peach, the fork rattling against the empty jar. Vola's back was still turned to him, so he lifted the jar and drained the last drops of syrup. "But wait, how'd you get the ice?" "I've got a refrigerator out on the porch. It's gas, so's the stove and the water heater. I've got everything I need." She set 2 blue plates down on the table. Peter's mouth watered at the smell of the food, but he waited. Vola wasn't finished, he sensed. Okay, we're going to stop there. I will finish that chapter tomorrow. Hope you have a lovely day and stay safe. Bye.